Welcome to Midnight Reel, episode 4. You've made it past it, guys. You've reached episode 4. If I was there, I'd give you a high five. So you just have to suffice with me saying I'd give you a high five, and that's it.
Well, pal. It's an internet high five right there.
That's right. It's the one and only. Sadly, there's been a loss at the Midnight Reel.
Temporary loss, hopefully.
Man, why don't you let me just draw it out? You had to ruin it. I was trying to draw it out, make it a much longer, and probably start making people feeling bad and all that. Only to come in with that, huh! Just temporary. Yeah, but Patrick is not with us this week. He said, screw you guys.
That's pretty much how that phone call went.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Almost verbatim.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
So across from me, not to my left nor my right, but right in front of me is the one and only Scott Phillips.
Change things up. Gotta move around, you know? Keep people out of the hot seat for too long.
That's right. And I am Joe DePew. We are the Midnight Reel Podcast. We are here to talk movies, binge-worthy shows, in general cinema for your ear pleasure. And that's generally kind of how it works. Last few weeks we've had some interesting conversations. I mean, I don't know if it's too early to do flashbacks. Back in the day when we talked about that Spider-Man Homecoming, wow, I remember that like it was yesterday. It was great. But enough of that. We were actually just gone, and we went to the one and only Universal Studios.
Orlando.
I love ya, Orlando. Anyways, we got to see some pretty cool stuff. We went during the Halloween Horror Nights. Mm-hmm. So we got to see all those horror-themed haunted houses from the movies. Some pretty cool stuff.
If you're a fan of movies, Universal Studios is definitely the place to go.
I agree. If you're into like theme parks in general. If you're not a fan of theme parks.
Right, yeah.
But there's still a lot of great shows there, even regardless of just rides or things like that. So it's still a fun time to go to. But we spent a few days there. That was fun. Got to see some really cool stuff. Got to learn some horror makeup tricks and things like that. The whole one.
Or one horror makeup trick, yeah.
But it was a fun time. If you are a movie fan, it is a blast to go to. And they constantly are updating and doing new things. If you are a fan of horror, go during Halloween Horror Nights. To be honest, I think you'll have a good time. Just don't go on the first weekend, maybe not the second. Try to go in that happy middle area. Yeah. It was pretty crowded.
Pretty crowded, and they still had a lot of stuff to figure out.
Yeah. So on with some of the stuff we want to talk about in the opening. We are big Netflix people over here. Netflix originals have come up in a big way, and we talked about it a little bit last week with the Marvel Cinematic Universe through Netflix, but also some of their original movies. Now they're starting to do anime adaptations. The new Death Note dropped a couple weeks ago, just like that. But yeah, did you watch that, Scott?
I did.
I did too.
You know, I was a little torn on it. I was kind of in that middle ground of I have not watched the entire anime. I watched about the first half of it. And so I went in kind of knowing the basis of it, knowing the premise and where they were going with it. Went in and watched the movie, and, you know, my opinion on it is I felt it was very sporadic. I felt it didn't seem quite as streamlined as the anime was. I think a huge part of that is, like you said last week, they were trying to condense a huge anime into a short movie, which is really never going to work out too well in your favor.
The only thing I think one of the biggest problems they had working against it, though, is the characters are so defined in the actual anime. And if you have not watched the anime, and if Death Note, the movie, was your first, grasp at it, I would say you should do yourself a favor and go watch the anime. It is fantastic. The characters were completely destroyed in the movie. Even regardless from them trying to condense it into a movie, they destroyed the characters. Absolutely destroyed them.
Right.
the idea of the main character, Light, who becomes the hero Kira when he starts getting the Death Note. First off, he accepts the responsibility of what he does, and he's an extremely intelligent, very calculating person. And a lot of the entertainment value that came from the show really was driven between L and Light's interactions, where L knows that Light is Kira, but he has no way to prove it, and Kira knows he has to get rid of L in order to be able to continue what he's doing. So it's that constant, like, mental, psychological battle of wits.
Right.
And that's where the entertainment really came from. Instead, L was emotional, and he was just kind of, like, just wasn't L. And it doesn't matter really how they try to change it up to make it their own little thing. It just didn't work. And the idea of Light was just completely, again, just ruined based on how they wanted to try to alter it to make it much more approachable. I could have seen this being at least a 3-part miniseries, Netflix miniseries.
Right. That would have been a good idea.
I think that would have been a much better thing, because then it would still given them time to develop the characters a little bit, still allow them to maintain the core of who they are, and then kind of go on from there and actually have that big climactic final scene with Light. It's sad. It really is sad, because that could have been a really cool thing for people who are not real big anime watchers to finally kind of see why people really like some of these animes, like Seven Deadly Sins or Attack on Titan, which is still very popular here in the West, but it's obviously still kind of in a niche.
They had a live action Attack on Titan that I heard didn't do well.
It didn't.
I haven't watched it.
It was Asian produced. And it was I watched a little bit of it, but I mean, it just doesn't really hold the same kind of. And it's nothing against Eastern movie studios like that, but it's just they don't get the same kind of financial backing, so there's a lot of things that take a hit visually,
right?
And they still try to maintain that. Where I think Western and Eastern really differ is Western really still tries to make sure that what's happening on screen makes sense for a live action, but I think Eastern do a better job at developing characters.
Right.
Even though what's happening on the screen really may not make sense, like you get the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragons where they're flying around the screen. It doesn't really make sense. It still looks cool. It's very stylized, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you watch a Western movie, the action sequences, things happening on screen make a lot of sense. But again, their characters still lose something. And I think that's where a good mixture of the two would actually end up being pretty good for them.
I can agree with that. And you also got to admit, too, that converting an anime to live action is probably going to be one of the hardest things
absolutely.
ever. I mean, even comic book, which we've been seeing a lot with the DC movies, the Marvel movies, and all that stuff, typically tend to be, I want to say, slightly more on the realism side. They try to make it superheroes in a natural, like, everyday world, and maybe have one or two extra things that is able to go. But anime is incredibly stylized, incredibly explosive, incredibly over the top, both with expressions and actions and all sorts of stuff. So converting that into a live action is got to be incredibly difficult.
Oh, I completely agree. I mean, and there's a lot to unpack with the specifically Death Note, but unfortunately, it didn't pan out. Now, some people may really like it, and that's totally fine. Like, we have nothing against if you like it. I like some stuff that people deem pretty stupid. But, I mean, I think it was a missed opportunity that really could have helped introduced those kind of animes to new people and let them see what all the commotion's about when it comes to those.
Right. Maybe they'll keep trying, and maybe they'll start hitting more streamlined animes, and maybe they'll be able to take in a lot of information and try to help tweak and correct any mistakes that they made in this.
But so this week, though, going on to our main topic, we were going to be talking about the Defenders. We talked about that last week, saying we were going to talk about it.
All right. Who wants some?
The Defenders. This one is a tough one to kind of start with. I mean, I will say this: we kind of touched on it last week, where it kind of shows, where they're showing the kind of introducing and the pairing off of the Defenders, and kind of how everything is introduced. I think is done very well. I think episode 1 actually was a great introduction to really how they end up all kind of coincidentally meeting each other and coming together.
Right. I mean, it's not even until episode 2 or 3 that they all actually meet.
I want to say that it's episode 3. I want to say it's episode 3.
Episode 3, I think, is when they finally first all 4 of them come together in the same place.
Right.
So it's cool they didn't just toss them all into a bucket at the very beginning and said, hey, this is happening now. They kind of gave you a little bit of lead up to it. And looking into this and watching it, we talked about how we would compare this with other type of collaborations, such as, Civil War and the Avengers and all that stuff. But a really good one to compare it to is actually Seven Samurai, which is reading interviews from the directors and stuff, more so what they were kind of comparing the show to. They didn't really want it to be a quote-unquote team-up or, hey, this is a new fight team called the Defenders that's going to last forever and all stuff. It was kind of a, necessary evil, I guess you could say, because these characters don't really super get along with each other. They're not all best friends. They're not all super willing to put their life out for each other. They just kind of realize, hey, right now, we currently all have the same end game. So let's go ahead and just do this together. But then at the end of it, completely give themselves the ability to just walk away from each other and say, hey, I don't ever want to see you anymore. Which is kind of a very interesting take on what MCU's been doing. Because everything they've done so far seemed to be like, hey, how can we draw this out? How can we make this longer? How can we add more and do more and do more and do more? But again, in that same interview with the director, he talked about how this is probably a one-off thing. There's a good chance that this season of The Defenders is the only Defender season we're going to get.
I mean, and even if we do, I think it ended on a note to support that, to be perfectly honest. I think it overall, I felt the series was decent. I think it was a decent, I guess you could say, kind of event, right? I wouldn't even call it a season so much as it was an event.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It's more so what it was.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, like I said, it's kind of like, if they are talking about making it a one-off type thing, then it definitely kind of feels more of just like it's going to be a major event inside the Netflix MCU. And, we'll see what happens from it. I do hope that the things that happened in the events, obviously, that transpired, that they're going to carry over, and there's going to be some effects down the road that affect the later seasons, the subsequent seasons of whatever shows they decide to do with it.
Right. Yeah, and so, as an overall thing, and again, the benefit that Netflix has is they were able to make these episodes as long as necessary. They were able to make the season as long as necessary. 8 episodes, that's closer to a miniseries than a season. I think a show like this would have suffered a lot more on cable television, because it would have had to been, each episode is dictated exactly how long it needs to be, and they would have had to fill a certain amount of time to, hey, it's got to be 20 episodes or 22 episodes, however long their season needs to be. And then they'd start stretching or compressing the story in odd places just to try to make it fit this little network. And
not even just that, they'd have to start censoring certain characters like Jessica Jones. But Jessica Jones would not have been able to be Jessica Jones.
Right, yeah. Oh, for sure.
So I think that's, definitely Netflix has the ability to dictate what they want as far as their content and how much of it they want. So what we could see in the future, though, is future team-ups. So, for example, they may do a Luke Cage, Daredevil team up and make that like another event. I mean, they could do that.
They could. What I expect to see is I expect to just see like what we saw in the first season of Jessica Jones, some small crossovers.
Right.
So there's not going to be. I don't think there will be like a Iron Fist Daredevil season.
Right.
There will be Iron Fist show, and then maybe a couple episodes. Daredevil comes in, helps him out with something, and then goes back about his merry way and does his own thing. And so I think you'll see a lot of that stuff because DC's doing it a lot. Even on their network, what is it? CBS. They're showing Flash or CW.
Yeah, CW.
With Flash and Arrow and
Supergirl.
Supergirl now and DC's Legend Tomorrow. They'll have periodic episodes in there where you'll have a 4-part episode, and each one of those parts is in, part 1 was on the Flash, part 2 is on Arrow, part 3 is on DC. So I think we'll see a lot of that, where you'll just have a couple of episodes that'll mesh together, or a couple of times where they'll meet up and handle something and then just split off again and kind of go about their way. I think Marvel, or at least I hope Marvel on Netflix will be a lot better about it than what DC's doing. For that case in point, there was an Invasion special on the DC episodes, and they had this big event, and it was like 3 episodes long. It crossed over Flash, Arrow, and DC, and at the end of it, the very next episode of the show, it's kind of like that never happened. It was just like this tiny little event, and then you just move on and just kind of forget about it. So it's a cool thing, but then to cut it out immediately and not really build off of that is kind of weird. I feel like Marvel and Netflix would be a lot better about actually involving them in a current story and keeping that going.
Well, if they do what they basically did with Punisher and Daredevil, I mean, that would be a perfect example of a team up that lasts maybe 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah, if not less.
Not less, but I mean I think they did a perfect job with the Punisher Daredevil event. And by the way, that Punisher, I think we've said it before, that Punisher was phenomenal.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, if that is any indication of how the Punisher Netflix original is going to be, oh my gosh.
Especially hearing again, news about John Berthal being pretty adamant about he doesn't want to be liked. Like, he doesn't want them to write a story to where you're watching the Punisher going, man, I really like this guy. I can really get behind this guy and rally behind him, because that's not who the Punisher is. Like, yes, he's hero in a very loose sense of the word, and he wants the show to stay true to that.
He is definitely what I guess you could refer to as a rogue vigilante.
Right. Yeah, very much so.
I mean, he's there to fight bad guys for sure, but he's not there to be anybody's friend nor really care about anything or anyone. I mean, he'll protect the innocent for sure, but he doesn't care what force he uses. And I think just talking about I know we're kind of going back to the Daredevil thing, but I mean, that really is a really clear indication of just kind of how good their characters are in the Netflix MCU. I mean, their characters are very diverse, and you definitely get that with the Defenders. Is each character has their own distinct personality, and they actually kind of play off each other extremely well.
Right.
Jessica Jones, kind of her kind of snarky personality, how she plays off of Daredevil the whole time, where he's just like, no, I can't do this, and she's just like getting frustrated with him the whole time, or like just even how like focused Danny Rand is the whole time, and just everyone's looking at him like, what is the deal with you? What are you talking about? I really like just the little subtle things they did with just their like those moments that they had, those quiet moments they had when they were just a team.
Right.
Or I mean, not even a team, we'll say that very loosely, but when they were together, and you got to see how they kind of interacted with each other. I think they did that really well. Talking about the hand, though, what did you think of the hand in general?
I mean, I respect that it was a really good idea in the sense of, because they want all this stuff to be interconnected, they want everything to fall together, they want all this stuff to take place in the same universe as the movies. That being said, because there's been a lot of talk, hush hush, rumors, this, that, whatever, about some of these characters and actors even intersecting with some of the movies, or potentially bringing some of the movies into some of these shows. So you had to create a villain or group that was big enough to require all of these individuals together to take it down, but not quite a big enough deal to involve the Avengers.
Kind of Spider-Man territory.
Yeah, because it was, it kind of had to be like that, street thug level kind of thing that, Iron Man and Hulk and Thor aren't going to be, wasting their time with. They're on bigger and better things going on right now.
I mean, Iron Man literally could have just gone find those people, send out drone, kill.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It would have been a 5-minute little mini-sode of, hey, Iron Man just took everybody out, or drop the Hulk into the Hands Tower and let that just be done real quick. Like,
yeah, they're not going to do anything.
So yes, I respect that in the sense of you had to find this balance, which couldn't have been very easy. However, at the same time, and I know it's something that you have brought up and mentioned, that you don't really feel a threat from the Hand at all. Like, they talk a lot about their main goal is to live forever and get back to Kung Lan. So it makes sense for Danny to be fighting them because they're the enemy of Kung Lan. But as far as saving the city and protecting the innocent of New York and all this stuff, they weren't really doing anything. They weren't really tearing anybody down. Like, sure, they were buying up a lot of land or, trying to control areas. And, as far as I could tell, for the most part, they were kind of like shutting down a lot of gangs and shutting down a lot of other stuff because they wanted control of all these areas. They started running some drugs and all that stuff. All right, cool, you guys are doing a drug bust, but they also shut down all the other drug dealers in the area. So they kind of helped the city a little bit in a way.
I mean, and I think that's kind of what the idea was, that they even kind of, Sigourney Weaver's character kind of even mentioned that to Danny Rand, saying if you look at what we're doing, you may even join us. And I think you could definitely see kind of part of that. But I think one of the problems that if you're going to have a bad guy that's, you could almost say a sympathetic bad guy where you
right.
kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing. The issue, though, has to be that the threat they're going to pose gives you enough of a reason to still want to fight against them. And that's what I think was missing from the Hand. I mean, they said, yeah, we're going to destroy... They had all those things placed throughout the city and all that kind of stuff, but it never really felt, like, dangerous.
Right.
And that's where I think, like, just the threat... Like you were mentioning, the threat level wasn't there. At least not to the point that you're going, oh my gosh, what's about to happen. It was still very entertaining to watch. It was still really good. Overall, I think it was still a very well done season. But I think there were a few missed opportunities from that sense. It wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. I'll fully admit it's not a bad event, but I wouldn't say it was one of their strongest showings.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about season or episode 1. Let's just kind of break it down and go through the series of... Episode 1 was a little slow because you just had to show each individual person and where they were to lead up to the point of, all right, this is the track that they're on, this is the road they're going down, this is how they're going to end up intersecting with each other. So that was episode 1. Kind of brought it in a little slow. And this is where, again, being able to binge things on Netflix saves a lot of these shows. If you had to watch that episode and then wait a whole nother week for the second episode, you might have died off a little bit.
I think it would have fallen into the territory of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right.
Because I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a really good show if you're able to do something like where it was Netflix, where you can watch the entire season all at once. Because there's a lot of really great moments. And the other thing is that I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would benefit from but this is where it's also its weakness, is that unfortunately people, they have to pad the show so that it's however long it has to be, when there's definitely, you can tell that there's definite padding in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, no, I mean, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., unfortunately, I think that's one of the reasons why it struggled so much, especially in the first 3 seasons, is that you would have those slower episodes that definitely could have been really good if you got to see the next episode right away.
Right.
But instead, you had to wait a full week, and sometimes 2 weeks, to get that new episode.
And so we get into episode 2 of The Defenders, and really, despite everything that happens that episode, the greatest thing is Luke Cage. Luke Cage getting punched in the face by Iron Fist. And that was just one of the most cinematic greatness things I've seen in a show and for as long as I can remember. The whole time this is going on, and I don't know about anybody else, but as soon as they mentioned The Defenders, that's immediately what I wanted to see. I wanted to see Iron Fist punch Luke Cage and see how they do it and see what happens. Because as a comic book fan, when you see these things come together, you know these things are going to happen. The biggest one for me was, as a DC person, Flash is one of my favorite characters. And there's always that argument of who's faster, Superman or the Flash. Well, the easiest way to break that argument down, I say, is if Superman's faster than Flash, DC doesn't need the Flash anymore. He's worthless. But as soon as you see a show where it's going to collaborate, the first time I remember was in Smallville, and they brought in the Flash, you immediately go, all right, I want them to race in this show, and I want to see how it happens. Like, I want to see who they make win. They did the same thing recently with the Flash and Supergirl. Same thing came to mind. So when this happened, I wanted to see the unstoppable Iron Fist punch the unmovable Luke Cage and see what happens. And I think they did it incredibly well. That whole fight scene where you start out with Danny Rand just doing his normal moves and all that stuff and just being really perplexed as to why nothing's affecting this guy, why it's not knocking him down, he's not wearing him out, you can't trip him up, like just nothing's working. And so finally after getting knocked down a couple of times, he gets to charge up that Iron Fist and just punches him right in the face. And you get that nice slow-mo of Luke Cage's face is just getting all contorted, and it just throws him against this wall. And you see both the combination of Danny Rand kind of going, how is he getting up again? I don't understand. And Luke Cage standing up going, what just happened? Like, I think that was perfectly done.
Oh, I agree. That was, and just sharing that exact sentiment. I mean, it is one of those questions that you have because they do team up in the comic books, right? They are a team that they actually stay a team for a while. It's
right.
Luke Cage and Iron Fist. So, now that they're actually together on the TV screen, you're like, oh man, this is going to be pretty cool. But yeah, that's always your question. Like, this guy can stop, he can't be hit by bullets. Nothing hurts him. What's the Iron Fist going to do to him? And it would have been one of those things that if the Iron Fist couldn't hit Luke Cage, it wouldn't affect him, then all they have to do is send Luke Cage in everywhere and Luke Cage wins. Right. So they definitely had to show some weakness to Luke Cage, as far as even from the superhuman sense. Mm-hmm. So I think, obviously, I think it kind of was, you knew something was going to happen, you just didn't know to what extent, but it was very well done. It was so funny to watch.
You just keep picturing it in your head. It's
I know.
It brings a smile to your face every time.
Yeah. Even the fact that he still has to hold his face where he got hit, oh my gosh, what the heck was that? That freaking hurt. That was a really good, that was one of the really cool moments. Another really cool moment was the fight scene, and we're getting into episode 3. Episode 3 is where they officially come together. And I think how they kind of end up meeting up was very, very interesting. Because Luke Cage getting punched in the face was pretty much the end of episode 2. Right. Luke Cage and Iron Fist have a nice chit-chat inside his pseudo dojo, his girlfriend's dojo. Ex-dojo, I guess.
Ex-dojo.
Yeah. All she was training hand people. But, so they're all talking, and Luke Cage tells him, yeah, you're a rich kid. You don't know what it's like to struggle and all this stuff. You have a lot of influence. Why don't you go do something about it? So he ends up going to tracking down the old businesses that his company dealt with, and specifically the one that was dealing with the hand. and goes and pays them a visit. And he goes up the building. He goes talks to the main boardroom, which is all hand members, and Sigourney Weaver's there. And then you had Jessica Jones. She was doing research on a building. She found that building, so she went into it. You had Daredevil, who I think he was dealing with some client, like it was a specific client. Yeah, it was a client that Foggy gave him, right?
It was Jessica Jones and Daredevil were there together because a client of Daredevil's was running into some trouble, and that was kind of running into the trouble that Jessica Jones was dealing with when she was investigating the disappearance of that guy.
Right.
And so that's when she started working back all the businesses, finding all these buildings, and she found out that it was Danny Rand's company was the one that was backing all these things and moving it all up. So that's why she was going there, and Daredevil, as Matt Murdock, had went with her.
Right.
And so they were both there on the lobby to investigate what this company was really doing behind the scenes with all of their other conglomerates and everything that they're funneling money into.
And that's the same thing with Luke Cage. Luke Cage found out about that specific building, and so he got into that building as well. And so they all kind of end up meeting at this building. Iron Fist is already at the top dealing with the hand, and they all start making their way up. And Luke Cage so obviously they start fighting. It's a pretty decent fight scene from as far as if you compare Iron Fist's show fighting, his own season, to this. I think it was a little bit better on choreography. But obviously, eventually, he starts getting taken down, and Luke Cage enters in, and he starts helping out. And then you had Daredevil and Jessica Jones come around the corner, Luke Cage busting through the wall. And after that, they're all like, hey, what are you doing here? Well, what are you doing here? Well, enough questions, let's fight people. And so they have this huge fight scene, and it actually was pretty good. I enjoyed it. Still doesn't rival Daredevil Season 2 Staircase. I have a hard time thinking that anything is going to top that fight scene. That fight scene was so well done.
It was like their piece de resistance so far as on fight scenes for this MCU.
Even compared to the actual MCU, theater MCU, that was one of the best fight scenes I've seen. That was, at least as far as compare. Like I said, if you were to compare the two MCUs, that Daredevil fight scene was so good. And
you know, the thing is, the thing that sets that aside immediately from all the other fight scenes is the lack of cuts. It's a one-shot fight scene. And I think, at least I hope, that that's what directors and everybody else is trying to get back into in these really in-depth, one-shot scenes. Because, yes, they are phenomenally harder to shoot. They are a lot harder to practice and set up, and everything about it is a harder thing to do. But you just get such a better result. And when you have these Captain America, Iron Man, and all these fight scenes from the actual MCU, and it's just cut, like they almost always pull you out of it when they cut that much. So you're kind of losing a little bit of the brutality of some of it, or the finesse of some of it based on what you're watching. And I like it because I know a lot of the guys that worked on Daredevil were either fans of or had friends of that do a lot of that Eastern film. You got like The Raid and The Raid 2 and all that stuff, and that movie, if you haven't seen either The Raid or The Raid 2 and you want to get some good fight scenes, almost all those fight scenes are solid one-shot fight scenes, and that those are what really pull you in and get you to see every single move that's going on, and you get the skill out of these people, and you just get to enjoy it.
I would say, though, if you had to pick one, I would say watch the first Raid. The second Raid is phenomenal. I enjoy the first one a lot more. There's a lot more, I don't know, I don't know what you would describe it as. It just feels more, I guess, based. This one, like the second one, feels a little bit more over the top.
A little bit, yeah, I can see that.
With like the hammer girl and the baseball guy, and like I felt like all three of the assassins were like all the fight scenes, by the way, in the Raid and the Raid 2 are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I just think if you're looking for something that definitely is a lot more based in it's just kind of more grounded. the first rate is going to give you a way better experience. But both are still phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I love both.
Yeah, that's just, and again, that's it's great to see when, you know, we can start doing that as directors and writers and producers and wanting to put that on TV, put that on screen. We have to get away from these cuts. It's too much. I call it the Michael Bay directing, because you get a lot of the shaky cams, the screen cuts and all stuff. And to me, it's the easy way out. You get to hide a lot of stuff. It makes the choreography a lot easier to do, because you don't have to be as fluid or as on point, because you know, hey, the camera's going to be shaking, you're not really going to be able to tell, or you're just going to get close and then we're going to cut to a different view, and then he's already going to be falling over, so you're never really going to see the hit, you're never going to see the kick or whatever. So it's just, you have to work a lot less to do those kind of fight scenes. And I'm hoping to see a lot more of that going forward in the MCU, knowing that they've done it in Daredevil.
I mean, I think the first movie that I can remember that started just doing the stupid amount of cuts during a fight scene was like the Bourne Supremacy. Not the first Bourne. Bourne Identity actually was not. It was actually pretty good about keeping it to a minimum. But Bourne Supremacy, I remember watching that movie and the fight when they were fighting inside the that little like hotel apartment when that first assassin came back in.
Right.
That scene was impossible to watch. Absolutely impossible. I've tried watching it. I tried watching it I think last year again. I was just going and watching all the Bourne movies again. That scene was impossible to watch. And unfortunately, it seems like for some reason Hollywood decided, let's just run away with this. And you saw it like for at least the next 5 years. Mm-hmm. Stupid amount of.
Well, you still see it. You still see it today with new movies that are coming out. You still see these huge amount of cuts, these huge amount of edits, these huge amount of like cameras not being steady, and you know they try to play some of these things off as, you know, oh, let's help pull you into the world by, you know, when a dude gets hit up against the quote unquote screen, it kind of shakes or falls over, so it makes you feel like you're really there. And it's like, I mean, kind of, but not really. Like, really, you know, most people that watch movies all the time know, yeah, but you're just using this as a cop-out to, oh, hey, I'm going to kind of get knocked around. That way you don't really have to see what's going on. And same thing, too, when you get the hits and the splatters up on the screen and all that stuff. Especially, if it's only happening, like, once or twice in an entire movie, that's just awkward and out of place. And it really goes to show that, all right, you're just trying to hide stuff. Like, you know, I don't know, I'm just kind of adamant about it. If you can't complete this thing, change it so that you can. Don't fake it, so to say. But yeah, so when you get into, you know, going on after that and you get to episode 4, which, like you stated earlier, was that whole scene of them just hanging out at that diner and talking was really good. Just watching these characters play off each other and how they talk to each other and really trying to get them all on the same road. It wasn't just like a, hey, what's up? Cool, we're all fighting this hand. Now we're all besties and let's all go do this together and this is awesome. Like you had a lot of that reality of, I don't know you. Why would I want to do this with you? Like, you know, and you got Jessica Jones, who doesn't really want to be a hero at all. So she's very adamant that whole time of, no, like this seems really stupid and dangerous and I have no reason to want to like risk my life for all this stuff. And what you also get into in this episode too with them fighting is, you get the classic Luke Cage telling Jessica, you know, when they're trying to talk about like who knows who and how, you get that great little look back when Luke Cage is talking about Danny Rand. He's like, I don't really know who he is, but he can pack a punch. He just kind of lays that out. And then you get, you know, the Jessica Jones talking about how, like, she straight up points out how she's, like, the only one that doesn't know martial arts. Because it's like everybody in the hands, a bunch of ninjas, they all know Kung Fu. Daredevil and Luke Cage are, like, super skilled fighters. I mean, Iron Fist, sorry. And then you got Luke Cage, who just doesn't have to fight because nobody can take him down anyway. So you get Jessica Jones, who's the only one that has to, like, I don't really fit here. Like, I'm just I'm strong, but yeah, this doesn't work for me. I just don't want to do this.
I mean, again, it's one of those quiet moments that you get to kind of see everybody for who they are. And I don't know, for me, it's like I said, we've talked about it before, just having those little quiet moments where characters can develop is really good. And I think they actually gave it just enough time. They gave it like a full episode. And you had the classic return of Stick, which I think his character's always been pretty fun to watch, even though he is a jerk most of the time. It's still a really entertaining character to watch. And then we get into episode 5, and I think this is when, for me, the show really started changing tones overall. Obviously, they talked about the hand. They kind of explained how the hand works. You have the 5 fingers of the hand. There were 5 council members in Kunlun, and they disagreed with how things were being done, and so they said, cool, we're leaving, and they became the 5 fingers of the hand. Each one has obviously lived for centuries. Evidently, they have killed many Iron Fists before Denny Rand, and each one of them has something very special, a unique power, you could say, unique ability. And I thought that was pretty good overall, like kind of their explanation of the lore behind the hand. And I feel like anytime you can give lore onto something like that, helps really build the world, which was fine. The only issue I started having is Elektra. Now, Elektra, I think, was still a great character. When she died, it was a big moment in Daredevil. And them bringing her back, I guess, was fine. I had no problem with that. But the only problem I had with the Elektra in Defenders is they bring her back, and she suffered from Episode 3 of Star Wars, Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
That's where I started losing some. It just started pulling me away from it. And if you, I don't know anyone personally that has not watched Episode 3, but in case you don't know, Anakin Skywalker, trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi, all that good stuff. We know that. But he gets confronted after talking to the Emperor for a little while, and you don't even really know how long. There's a point when everything bad is starting to happen. Mace Windu, who is one of the Jedi Order, is able to kill the Emperor right there, and he has his sword literally up against his throat, and Anakin Skywalker, for some reason, don't let him kill me. Cool, I won't. Gets Mace Windu killed. And there's no real believable lead up to it. And that's the thing I think what happens with Elektra is her loyalties start getting questioned. And the only thing you really see is Matt Murdock, who's Daredevil, go, Elektra? After there was their fight scene in Episode 3. And then that's it. There was no major conversation pieces with her. There was no major, let's go down memory lane together. No. None of that. There's brief snippets of something. And the next thing you know, are we really able to trust Elektra? I mean, where did that come from?
I feel like in The Defenders, her character took a very odd turn. So you get the premise behind her resurrection, and it's you don't remember who you were prior to being resurrected. It's a whole new life and all this stuff. Which again is kind of a plot fall, because they talk about how the 5 fingers of the hand have been resurrected many times over. So that makes you wonder, how do they still remember all this stuff from getting kicked out of Kunlun? If they've been resurrected, they're supposed to forget their past life. But, plot holes aside, she comes back. She doesn't really remember who she was, her name, any of that stuff. She gets trained to be Black Sky, which is supposed to be the super assassin for the hand and all that. Cool, that's all well and good. And then you get the kind of connection between her and Murdoch in Daredevil. him trying to talk her down, trying to bring her back, trying to bring her whole essence out. And that's the big conflict she has these first few episodes is she's been trained by the Hand, she knows the Hand, she's supposed to work for the Hand, but she's just feeling this unknown urge to be in love with this guy and go to him and all that stuff. So you're watching this confrontation kind of back and forth, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, she just flips on a dime and decides to kill the leader of the Hand and take over. And that just, to me, just didn't make any sense. There was nothing leading to that. That was just way out of left field, came out of nowhere. You have no idea why she would have all of a sudden made that kind of decision. And to not either, A, continue to be the Black Sky, which is what she was resurrected to be and trained to be, or go back to being on the side of Daredevil and being in love with Matt Murdock and taking that route. Like, those seem to be the only two paths available to her, and then she just cut the street out and went a different way.
Unfortunately, like I said, and I guess that's where, like I said, after this episode where her loyalty started getting questioned, that's where the entire series kind of takes a whole weird turn. Still, again, this is nothing like saying that the show was bad. It's just this is where it just, you have to kind of just be prepared to expect changes. You know, it doesn't really follow the formula, and it just kind of goes, again, like you said, off the left field. Still keeping the same basic premise where they're still trying to take over the city and do all their thing, but, you know, Elektra kills the leader and just kind of goes on doing a different thing with it. Overall, though, I mean, what do you think of the ending?
I mean, that's kind of the thing, too, that we talked about with this threat not really being there. I mean, really the only thing they were trying to do was use the Iron Fist to get this door open, which would get them to the materials they needed to continue to resurrect themselves so they could continue to live forever. Because essentially their plan is to live long enough to be able to go back into Kunlun. Like, everything else they do is just kind of a side thing. You know, the selling of the drug that they made and doing all that stuff was kind of we want to establish a lifestyle, you know, to where we don't have to worry about being able to survive because you're living forever. You know, it's expensive to live forever. It's a lot of things you got to pay for. So, not saying that
there's a lot of donuts you have to buy.
Yeah. You know, a lot of takeout, a lot of pizza orders.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I'm not saying that, you know, they were good people, but, I mean, the entire end of, you know, the entire building exploding and all this big stuff going on at the end was actually done by the Defenders. The Hand just wanted to open the door, which, of course, they did, because even though the Defenders knew they were trying to get Iron Fist out there, they tried tying him up and keeping him sidelined. Of course, you know, he still had to, like, fight his way back in and be part of it, because, you know, part of why you just kind of hate Danny Rand's character right now, both in his show and in the Defenders, he's just, you know, he's played by an older person who's acting like a young, you know, not no nonsense, but just
impetuous.
Yeah, you know, kid who's just gonna just run in head first and not really know what's going on. And he just keeps doing this over and over again. And eventually you gotta have him, like, get past that and stop making really dumb decisions. You would assume that, yes, at least they made it to where the Defenders were smart enough to say, hey, we need to set you out because they need you to get to that door. Even if you went in to help, hey, don't go near the door. Like, don't go down to this basement level. Stay up here, fight all the people up here you need to, go upstairs, fight all the people you need to up there to help out. Don't go down to the basement. Like, that's the one place they need you to be to open this door so they can get to what they want. And instead you get him going down there, charging up his Iron Fist, which he seems to have so much trouble doing still all the time. And you get that ever so convenient punch towards Elektra that she dodges. His fist now opens the door. Good job, guy. Like, so this end climax final battle was just kind of okay. Like, it almost seems like they had this really good direction they were going, and then they got near the end and just kind of went, I don't know what to do now, so let's just have this happen. Because I feel like that's the end of the Defenders. It just kind of happened.
And that's the problem. And that's like you said, it's not a bad. This is why we're like, I need to re-clarify this. It's not bad.
We are nitpicking at this show because this show is really good.
Yeah.
It is worth watching.
Yeah. The characters in it, writing, all that's actually pretty good. The only one that obviously out of the characters that I feel like struggle is Danny Rand. But Matt Murdock, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and even Danny Rand's girlfriend are all pretty fun to watch. And they all do some really cool things. I mean, again, it's one of those things that I'm interested to see how they're going to take the events from the Defenders and how they're going to apply it in later seasons. I mean, there's plenty of things that we can talk about in reference to the Defenders. And again, this is all, like we said, this is nitpicking. But I do hope that they figure out Iron Fist's character. I think all the other characters are, I mean, besides a few small changes, I mean, very minimal, are all very good.
They're very ironed out, so to speak.
See what you did there?
Yeah, you can get that.
But as far as Iron Fist is the one character that you're just sitting there going, yeah, sure, guy. You do you. And it's just kind of one of those, I think right now, Iron Fist is their weakest IP right now if it comes to shows. I think their best one is very possible. Could be the Punisher.
Could be.
Punisher looks phenomenal, and I cannot state this enough. I think Punisher and Daredevil are going to be their mainstay. They're going to mainstays.
I think so. I think they'll last the longest.
I think so.
Unless they make some major changes to Iron Fist. Yeah. So overall, for Defenders, what would you give it?
If I had to give it a score, I'd probably give it a solid 7 out of 10.
I can see that. There's definitely a lot of work that needed to be done. It was the first time they had put something like this together. So it does kind of suck that it's not, a good solid 10 because there is a lot of chance, like they said, that they're probably not going to do it again. This is probably just a one-off thing, but I do think it helped close off this Hand being the enemy and is allowing to set them all into a new direction.
I hope they bring back Kingpin.
They very well could.
I hope they do. He was actually a really good bad guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of options for them, and that's what's good. So I think that's what they needed to do was, instead of kind of ending this in each individual season, because Daredevil in his own season had been dealing with things that were the Hand. Same thing with Jessica Jones. Luke Cage not as much, but Iron Fist, obviously, that was his mainstay. So instead of having to find a way to end it in each individual series, they were able to do it all together, close it off, and then now hopefully start anew with everybody else's seasons and move on and progress away from this villain. So what's cool is I was looking up a lot of tidbits and also stuff about the Defenders and their filming and all this stuff. It was good to know that the script for each episode that they did on the Defenders, they consulted the showrunners for each individual show. So if it was an episode that involved Iron Fist and Luke Cage, they wrote the script and they took it to the showrunners, the director, producer, and screenwriter of Iron Fist and Luke Cage, and said, hey, we want you to go over this, we want you to read it, tell us what you think, because we want it to mesh with your character. We don't want to change your character in any way. We don't want them to be doing stuff that's out of ordinary for them, because you can't bring all of those directors from each of those individual shows to direct one show. You still have to bring in somebody else to do that. So it was cool to find out that They didn't bring in a director and a writer that's just like, hey, we're just going to do whatever we want and screw whatever else has been going on. So it was cool to be able to continue that, because then when you watch it, it feels a lot more fluid. It doesn't feel like it was a huge jarring change that all these different things were made up and none of it makes sense based on what you've seen before in these other shows.
So the person we have to blame for Iron Fist is the actor.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I don't really want to blame him too much, because it is, you take the bad writing from his show, and then so when the writers and directors for the Defenders want to not change his character, they want to keep it true to his show, and that bad writer director from his season is going, yeah, that looks good to me. It kind of continues. But what's funny on that is we talked previously when we were talking about Iron Fist about how they had to rush his season. They had to rush the writing, rush the directing, rush the filming, rush the post-production, whatever. Because according to what they had talked about is that they started filming the Defenders immediately after they wrapped on Iron Fist. So that means that they had already been writing the Defenders before they were even done with Iron Fist. Which again kind of gives you these other, or maybe this is a big reason why his character and his shows had so many problems. Apparently they filmed it under the title Group Therapy, which I think is funny.
For those of you, project name?
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, whenever big shows, movies, whatever come out, when they start doing their filming or any of their work, whatever, they use a very vastly different title. They do that because people are going to want leaks, people are going to try to get photos and scripts and pictures and videos and all this stuff, what's going on. And so if you announce that you're shutting this road down to film the Defenders, you're going to get swarmed with a lot of people. You're going to get swarmed with people trying to take pictures and get inside information and know what's going on. Now you shut the show down, you shut a street down in New York because you say, hey, we're filming the show called Group Therapy. Nobody knows what that is. Nobody's heard of it. Not as many people are going to care to show up. Now, you will still have those people that are going to show up regardless, just to see and try to make note of it or see what it really is, but you cut that number down a lot. Supposedly, they started filming Season 2 of Jessica Jones as soon as they wrapped on the Defenders as well. So they're cramming all this stuff in as fast as possible to try to keep bare minimum wait times, I guess.
Well, I think the Defenders definitely put a, I don't want to use this, but I almost feel like I have to, is a wrench in their plans. Not in a negative sense, but in the sense that now, they took a break from all those other shows because they wanted to do the Defenders. But I mean, obviously they've been waiting for Jessica Jones for a while now. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that they need to get it done. There's a lot of cool stuff now that, David Tennant's character is gone. I want to see who the bad guy is going to be for her and what challenges she has to face, because she's such a fun character to watch. Absolutely just fun to watch. So, I mean, I'm excited for that. But other than that, I think, besides Punisher, I don't know, have they announced the Daredevil Season 3 yet?
I haven't looked into all of them.
I think they've just been talking about it, but I don't think it's been officially announced.
Yeah, I feel like they've announced a Season 2 of Luke Cage.
Yep.
They've also stated they've already started the filming for Jessica Jones Season 2, so that one's there. And then, we know for a fact that Punisher's coming out. But I don't know 100% if they've confirmed a Season 2 of Iron Fist or a Season 3 of Daredevil.
Yeah, obviously they just barely finished Defenders, and prior to that was Iron Fist. I could see at least in a couple more seasons of Daredevil. At least 2 more. I mean, you never know. I don't know. Like, obviously, since Netflix can kind of keep these shows going as long as they want, they could. And it sounds like if you watch the Defenders and watch the last bit of Season 2, he does not really want to be Daredevil anymore.
Right.
He does it because he has to, and that's kind of starting to get into the Batman Christian Bale's Batman's. That's the Christian Bale Batman syndrome.
Well, the very last scene in Defenders, where you see that Murdoch is alive. He's in this hospital bed, and he's all bandaged up, and he's laying there, is a straight copy of a comic book page. And I believe it was called either like New Beginning or Rebirth or something along those lines. So to go through that, to make sure that you know at the end of it that he is alive, that he didn't die in this building explosion, and to match that up with the comic so well, that's about, like a renewal of Daredevil. That to me tells me they're going to continue this season. And I think he's going to, as a character, finally make that switch back to where, the early on, season 1, he was all about wanting to be this vigilante, do all this stuff, and then he realized it was maybe not such a good idea. That's kind of why he hung it up. But having Foggy give him his suit to go out and do this, and then going through all that and saving the city and doing everything and making it out, I think they're going to have his character make that turn to where he's going to go back to where he is. It's going to be more of he is Daredevil, and Matt Murdock is his secret identity, basically. His alternate identity.
Well, and I hope that's the case. I really do, because he's a great character to watch. The actor who plays him does a fantastic job. One of those complaints that you always have with any kind of like hero of any sort is, are they going to be able to pull off the hero side of him versus his normal persona? And that conflict always is there. And no matter which character, whether it be Superman to Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne to Batman, we talked about it during Spider-Man Homecoming, the Peter Parker to Spider-Man himself, those personas are very difficult to bounce off each other. And I think the actor who plays him does a fantastic job on both sides.
Oh yeah,
he's super entertaining, super entertaining to watch. Oh my goodness! And like out of the Defenders, he was always the one that I just liked watching the entire time. Even though he didn't really want to be Daredevil, you understand it because obviously you had 2 seasons prior watching him come to that conclusion for himself, and he's just a great character to watch. He still knows he's still a no-nonsense guy, so someone just try to mess with him, he'll take it to him. But it's just a great character to watch, and I do hope that they continue the trend, building these characters now that, these guys are getting their own season 2, really start fleshing them out. I'd like to see what they do with Luke Cage. We only saw that one season and that brief cameo with Jessica Jones and now the Defenders. I really want to see some really cool stuff with Luke Cage. I think he could have some really cool things happen in his season. Same thing with Jessica Jones. And I am almost begging at this point that they do that with Iron Fist. If he gets to season 2, I want it to be good. I don't want him to sit there for 15 seconds charging up his fist and only one fist to do one thing. Like, no. He's the Iron Fist. He should be like...
blink of an eye, both fists are raging, and he's just going to town on
yeah,
people.
I want to see that. I think that's what the character deserves.
I think so, too. So, for the scary part, though, is the Disney thing. Of Disney pulling all of their stuff from Netflix, and Disney owning Star Wars and Marvel now. There was a quote from the director of Defenders where he said that after all this series stuff with Netflix, the Marvel MCU plans on branching out in a lot of other ways. So we don't really know what that means. If they already know in the future if they won't be on Netflix anymore, or if they plan on just releasing a bunch of like small movies. I know we had kind of talked about how back in the day it was the direct-to-DVD movies were always the crappy ones. Maybe if they're getting pulled from Netflix, they plan on, hey, here's a direct-to-DVD miniseries of Luke Cage, here's a direct-to-DVD miniseries of Jessica Jones, or so on and so forth. Because I don't think anybody really knows, as far as right now, if Marvel will continue to have things on Netflix going forward. Maybe all these shows will flip to Disney's streaming service that they make, And
Well, the only thing I wonder about that is because, I mean, obviously I don't know the writers or the directors or even the actors if they were employed through specifically Netflix.
right,
Because if that's the case, since it is a Netflix original, right, it's not something that they can just sit there and go, hey, we're going to pull that. So even let's assume Disney says, hey, we're pulling the licenses from this, you can't make it anymore. Can we buy those seasons? No, there are shows.
right.
We
yeah.
made them.
So they can't take those shows that are already there off of Netflix. I mean, Netflix may choose to if Disney tries to continue their own, but those shows will be there on Netflix for sure. But that'll be the big question is, yeah, if all those people are employed through Netflix, and if Disney decides, hey, we don't want Marvel stuff on Netflix anymore, we want to do it ourselves, are they going to try it with getting all new directors and writers and actors and try to do the same shows? Or are they just going to kill these shows and try doing different heroes? Or maybe they do make the smart play and say, hey, we still make money off of it when you put Marvel's name on it. So just continue. Because right now, Netflix is spending all of their money to produce these shows, and Disney makes money off of it. So, I mean, granted, I don't work for a big company. I'm not a CEO of Netflix or Disney, but to me, that makes a lot of sense. If you're spending all of your money to make these shows, and if they're successful, I make money. If they're not, you lose money. That seems like a win-win for me. Like, it doesn't hurt me in any way if these fail, but if they succeed, I make money. So to me, it would make sense for Disney to continue to allow Netflix to make these shows.
I do hope that's the case. I really do hope that they allow it, because I think there is does Star Wars have an original series through Netflix?
I don't think so. I know the like their animated stuff is all on Netflix, but it's not a Netflix original.
Okay.
So Netflix didn't front the bill to produce all those.
I'd have to double check because I could have sworn there was one Star Wars that is a Netflix original.
It's possible. I'm not saying I know all of them, but I know that like all the major ones, like all the Clone Wars stuff and all that, that's not a Netflix original.
No, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, there could be one or two, a few series of Star Wars stuff. But yeah, so I mean, same thing, carry over. It wouldn't make sense for Disney to pull all that from Netflix and say, hey, now we want to start spending our own money trying to produce these and hope they're successful. If you already have somebody else that's spending their own money to film this stuff, let them keep doing it. Like, and you just rake in the money. Like, just let it all fall into your lap and you don't have to do anything for it.
Yeah. I mean, that Disney separation is kind of bizarre, but I mean, we'll see what happens with it. It could, for all we know, they could do some really cool stuff with the property, their IPs that they have. We'll see, though. I just hope that if they do get to continue the Netflix MCU, I really do hope that they do some really cool stuff with the subsequent series. Seasons, I should say.
Right.
So, as far as our main topic goes, that's the end of it. I hope you're still with us. It's been it's a fun little conversation piece. But yeah, I mean, let us know what you think on the Netflix MCU, whether it be Defenders, Jessica Jones, what have you. You can tell us we're wrong. I mean, we'll probably ignore you, but that's okay.
We just got all the facts. You guys have opinions.
Yeah. Our podcast is completely factually based. We don't have any opinions whatsoever.
It's only the truth here.
That's right.
Klaatu, Verada.
But anyways, going from that, in our original episode, we were starting something called The Wonderfully Bad, and we always kind of mentioned it, but we never really got to go as far as we would have liked into it. We are going to be trying to make sure we take more time to actually expound on our Wonderfully Bad.
I like that word.
It's a good one, right?
It's a good one.
On our Wonderfully Bad movie of the week. Hopefully you guys did get to enjoy the Kung Fu, like the stupid Kung Fu movies.
I mean, really just a whole Kung Fu weekend is what they could have done.
They could have.
The last
And
one.
it's a fantastic weekend. It's a great way to spend your time. It is extremely productive. If you think like mowing the lawn is productive, no. You're using your time wrong. You should watch those kind of stupid movies. They make life worth living. But now we're going to be treading on some toes here, because I know some people are going to disagree with what we're about to say.
I'm pretty sure we tread on toes the entire length of our podcast.
I'm sure we do. But I think this one is it's gonna tickle some people's anger. I don't know where I was going with that. I was trying to think of something, but I couldn't do it.
You had it, and
it was right on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, it's Big Trouble in Little China. This is a bad movie, guys. If you defend that this is a good movie in some way, shape, or form, I will slap you. I won't feel bad about it either. It's a bad movie.
He's done it. He slapped me once before because I told him this movie was amazing.
Yeah, this is a bad movie.
It's not amazing.
It's a bad movie. Saying that, though, it's such a great movie to watch.
Good. It's so good.
From the cheesy one-liners to the campy premise to the over-the-top characters, the Kurt Russell is just fantastic, top to bottom. The 80s effects. I mean, this is just a great movie to watch. There's no denying that. But we have to agree, it is a bad movie.
Now, I did it a little heavy for last week. But we're going to let you guys in on a little behind-the-scenes secret. We're not going to tell you on our weekly podcast which our next week's Wonderfully Bad movie will be. However, in our nice little cuts that we get where we have our little movie clips and all that stuff, I will periodically use clips from our next week's Wonderfully Bad movie. So as you're listening to our podcast and you hear those clips, you hear those cuts, if you can figure out what our Wonderfully Bad movie is, we want to hear about it. Tell us that you guessed it. Tell us what your favorite part is, and we'll let you know the following week if you were right.
Yeah. So, talking about Big Trouble in Little China, do you have a favorite part?
Oh man, that's a hard question right there.
It's hard, but there's specifically one scene that I'm thinking of. But you go ahead.
One of the ones that's great for me is when he's driving his truck down the alley and gets stopped by all these magic ninjas. Basically, he runs one over and just shows back up, and then he sees all these other guys fly in. You know, they're shooting lightning and just flying around everywhere, and he just has no idea what's going on. His reality was just flipped over, and he lost it.
I think one of my favorite scenes, and it's one of those scenes that it's the reason why I enjoy it so much is because it's completely out of character, but it makes sense. Like in some weird cosmic way, it makes sense, and you get this because of the original, like when they're playing that gambling thing, and he's like, "Hey, I can break this bottle with this knife." Yeah, okay, not that bottle though. I want you to use this bottle. And then he hits it and he swings it, like grabs it right before it hits his face. It's all in the reflex. I like the last scene though when he goes up against why am I drawing a blank his name?
Lo Pan.
Yeah. And so he throws the knife. It's like a complete whiff, right? He whiffs it, and the guy's like, "Oh, this is a good knife. Goodbye, Mr. Burton." He throws it, grabs it, and throws it right back in his face. It's all in the reflexes.
Oh,
like the delivery of Kurt Russell's one-liners are so good. Oh my goodness. But this is again where the bad part of it comes in. He kills Lo Pan, and for some magical reason, the entire building starts just
falling apart.
Which, by the way, you don't even see what happens to the building. All you know is that shakes. They get out. There's nothing in the news. There's nothing going on. Like nobody says, "Hey, this random skyscraper just fell down in Chinatown." Nobody knows why.
Oh man, I think one of my great one-liners. I mean, this whole movie is just one-liners. It's one-liner after one-liner after one-liner. Boy, this movie is so great and yet so bad. So you have the scene where they're on their way. You got him and his little crew, and they're gonna start making their way through to start fighting the bad guys and working their way to the boss. And then all of a sudden, this random like floating brain thing just comes flying around the corner. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't match in with any of the theme that's going on. It's not like ancient or Asian or anything. It's just like a random. It looks like a floating brain with like a face, and it comes around the corner and like. All the kung fu guys are getting prepped and ready and like, oh my god, we might have to fight this thing. And then Jack Burton just takes his gun out and shoots at it, and it just scurries off away. And like you never see it again. It never shows up again. But everybody looks at him after he shoots it. And he's like, hey, you never know till you try. And you're like, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, you got the gun. You might as well shoot at it and see what happens.
I think one of my favorite one-liners from Kurt Russell is, it's like, you know what Jack Burton says at a time like this when have you paid your dues? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail. And like, it's just how he delivers. Like I said, the delivery of these lines are so good. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. I mean, it's hard for you watch it and it's a bad movie. We all know it. But it's hard to really find anything that you would change. Like, everything is done so well. The commitment of these actors and actresses were just right on. It was just great to watch. It's such a fun movie. It's highly recommended from top to bottom. Go watch Big Trouble in Little China.
Alright, so I can admit, because of this quote that you just mentioned was so great, but it is so long, we had to pull it up. But Joe, I need you to deliver this quote now that I have it up for you.
Oh. Okay. So this is, if you are wondering, this is the entire quote of the line I was just mentioning. He goes, when some wild-eyed, 8-foot-tall maniac grabs your neck, taps you on the back of your favorite head up against the barroom wall, and he looks you crooked in the eye, and he asks you if you paid your dues, you just stare that big sucker right back in the eye, and you remember what old Jack Burton always says at a time like that. Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.
And if that doesn't tell you the gloriness that is this movie, just nothing will.
Oh, yeah.
If it is somehow a movie that you have not seen, you need to change that now.
It's a movie that it will forever... I will watch this movie at least 2 to 3 times a year. Like, when you don't have anything like... And this is one of those movies that you could put on in the background, and all of a sudden you hear a specific part, you can pause whatever you're doing and just watch that scene, and it doesn't really matter that you're watching the rest of the movie, but you're watching that scene, and you'll find it just as enjoyable as you do now. It's a great movie, highly recommended. That is a 5 out of 5. What are we going to go with this one?
Oh, man. That's a...
Old Jack Burton quotes. 5 out of 5 Jack Burton quotes. Oh, Jack Burton. Because he's got a lot of those Jack Burton quotes.
To quote the scene that I brought up, to quote my favorite line about that scene when he's talking about it later. So he ends up going up, meeting with people, and he tries to explain to them what happened, what he just saw. He goes... All I know is this lone pan character comes out of thin air in the middle of a goddamn alley while his buddies are all flying around on wires, cutting everybody to shreds. And then he just stands there waiting for me to drive my truck straight through him with light coming out of his mouth. Like, he has no idea what's going on. It's just so out of his own.
Oh, man. This is so good. Go watch Big Trouble in Little China.
Highly, highly recommended.
Yes. Jack Burton quotes and everything. Anyways, I think that'll about do it for this week at Midnight Reel. We really do appreciate you sticking with us. And please.
4 weeks now.
4 weeks now, yeah. So that's a month,
Ooh.
sir. 1 month.
1 whole month with us.
Yeah. Let us know what's going on. If you have any tips, anything that you think maybe we can shorten, extend. Maybe you want to hear a little bit, something special, a little shout out with your name. Let us know.
If you guys have any suggestions on wonderfully bad movies, be sure to comment those. Let us know what you want. If we haven't seen it, we'll watch it. We'll talk about it. If it fits that category, we'll do it.
Oh yeah, we're always down for some wonderfully bad movies. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us. I am Joe Depew.
Scott Phillips.
All right, take care.
Okay then. That's it.